Well, so much for crashing the Ravens' 30th anniversary celebrations. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, we are down bad, pretty bad. The Ravens celebrating their 30th anniversary of when they, Art Modell and the rest of the bandits stole the team from Cleveland in the dead of night, moved it to Baltimore, resulted in the Browns not having a team for 4 years. Would have been nice to go in and crash that celebration, stick it to the Ravens for stealing our team away from us. And instead, what happened was what we have seen countless times from the Cleveland Browns since the team was stolen away and we came back as an expansion team, which is them getting blown the fuck out. Ravens comfortably winning this game, was never really close at any point in this game, even with the Browns defense playing as well as they did, which sounds hilarious when a team gives up 41 points and you can sit there and say the defense played well. But you actually can with this game. The Browns defense did pretty much all they could in this game. But a combination of just pathetic offensive play, pathetic special teams play, which resulted in 21 points. The defense gave up 13 points in this game if we're really counting. 21 points giving up by the offense and special teams. So just an absolute shit show on offense, on special teams. Just what we've seen, in this kind of, this is 9 games, I think now, dating back to last season, that the Browns have lost on the trot. And just, throughout that period, going back to last year, it's pretty much been the same story every game that they do lose and they do get blown out. It's just poor offensive football, poor special teams. The defense does what they can, but there's only so much you can do for so long. When your offense can't get a first down, when your special teams is giving up points, it doesn't matter how good your defense is. There is only so much you can do. All the shit they talked, all of that stuff. Judy, he talked some shit, didn't really back it up. Grant Delpit talked some shit, and to be honest, the defense backed up their stuff. Derrick Henry in this game, Grant Delpit was asked, how hard is it to bring down Derrick Henry? He said not very hard. We've spoken about how much success the Browns have actually had in Derrick Henry. In 7 games before this one, he'd only gone for over 100 yards once, and that was a game where the Browns were 3-13, had pretty much their backups out there and were trying to lose because they were tanking. So another game where the Browns weren't tanking when they're going up against Derrick Henry, and 11 carries, 23 yards. His longest run on the day was 8 yards. That is the definition of locking up Derrick Henry. Had no catches, no receiving yards, so just 23 yards on the day for Henry. Pardon me. No touchdowns. He did have 2 nice blocks, to be fair to him, in pass protection, but the Browns defense backed it up. They said they can stop Derrick Henry, and they proved that they can. But unfortunately, when you're facing the Ravens, it's not as good as Derrick Henry is. He is just a luxury on this team. This Ravens rushing attack has been so good for so long since they've had Lamar Jackson. This Ravens team has been so good for so long, pretty much since they've had Lamar Jackson. So even when you can lock up Derrick Henry, they can still beat you in other ways. And, when you then go and beat yourself, as we've seen with the Browns so many times, then that's how you get to a blowout like you had in this game. The game pretty much started as we kind of expected it to go on from the offense. They ended up in a 3rd and 20 on the opening drive due to losing some yards and a penalty. Cole Hamilton made a great play, to be fair to him, on Sampson on the screen. Postage probably could have got out to him a bit faster, but still a good play from him. Quinshon's first carry of the game went for -2 yards. So wasn't the best start from the offense, and was pretty obvious from that point how it was going to go. We've seen this too many times. As I mentioned, the Browns defense, they played really good run defense throughout this game, especially early. They got some nice stops, nice tackle for losses on Derrick Henry to really set the tone early. Mason Graham just swallowed Derrick Henry on one of those tackles for loss. Mason Graham was really in and about it in the first quarter, second quarter, in the first half. He was involved in a lot of those stops, in the run defense for the Browns. So it was really encouraging to see, the Browns defense early on. The offense wasn't really, as I've mentioned, not really being able to do anything, but the Browns defense was keeping this team in the game, which made you think, if this offense can get something going, then this defense has given them a chance for them to stay in this game. The special teams didn't start out, pardon me, my throat, wow. The special teams didn't start out too bad. Rayshon Jenkins had a pretty much touchdown saving tackle on special teams on the return. Ravens scored a field goal first in this game before they then obviously scored the touchdown. Miles was balling early. He was balling throughout this game, had a sack, tackle for loss on back-to-back plays, reminiscent of last week when he had those 2 back-to-back sacks. He was doing his every part early on in this game to keep them in it, and that's what they did. But unfortunately, the offense just couldn't move the ball. In the first quarter and throughout this game, but then, the second quarter is when kind of all the shit kind of started hitting the fan. The block punt, obviously, Corey Bojorquez getting hurt at that point. I mean, Corey Bojorquez has done more than the Browns offense in the last year. So when he gets hurt, you're thinking, oh no, this really could get bad. Ravens scored their first touchdown. Cam Mitchell got cooked on that, on what was the first of, I think, 3 touchdowns that he was getting cooked on. The Browns defense overall was pretty good, but there was some bad, and especially from that secondary that I will get into. But it is obviously it starts with the offense, and the Browns defense gave up a couple of big plays, shall we say? Obviously, the deep ball in the third quarter, early in the third quarter, to Hopkins to get the ball to the 1 yard line. But then, the Browns they gave up the ball on the half 1 yard line, so literally a half yard from the goal line. And after multiple plays from the defense, and resulted in a third down sack from Myles Garrett, his second sack, 1.5 sack, whatever it is, of the game at this point, to force a 32-yard field goal after the ball was, as I said, within the 1 fucking yard line. Yes, the defense did give up some plays in it, but they were able to make up in the most cases, and especially that was just 2 weeks in a row now where this defense has had just an incredible series, just a incredible run of plays. And as I said, to have the ball at the half yard line and then force a 32-yard field goal, that is just incredible from that defense. But as I mentioned, obviously shit was hitting the fan everywhere else on the team. They'd had the block punt, and then Flacco threw his interception, which was just an horrible interception, if we're being completely honest. Just no reason to throw that ball. He threw it into like quadruple coverage whilst on the run. He should have just run out of bounds and lived to see another day. That was just a stupid throw from Joe Flacco. A really, really bad pick from Joe Flacco. Last week we spoke about how neither of those interceptions were really his fault. This one really, really was his fault. It can't really get any more his fault on this one. This was a terrible, terrible interception from Flacco, which was then returned all the way to the Browns' pretty much 5 yard line. So, the Browns defense, as I mentioned, they get the stop on the half fucking yard line. They force a 32-yard field goal from that. And then what does the Browns offense do straight afterwards? they just give the ball back within the 5-yard line. I mean, at this point, the defense has got to just be fucking furious. You can't even be surprised at that point if they just throw the towel in, because they must just be thinking, what is the point? They managed to get another 3 stops. They get a 3rd down stop, so they're actually still trying, and credit to them. But then the Ravens do go for it on 4th down. Lamar throws the 2-yard touchdown. At this point, it's pretty much ball game. The Browns then had a couple of bad calls, shall we say? I mean, the replay assist coming in to overturn a call, which was just not even blatant in any way. They're supposed to only be if it's an obvious error, and it was in no way, shape or form an obvious error, yet somehow they came in and screwed us over. That obviously then led to the only good thing happening for the Browns in this game, really. Finally, something good happening to the Browns. So many times we've seen these bullshit things happen against the Browns, but after Kevin challenged the Fanning catch, which was definitely a catch and was rightfully overturned, he then decided to go for it on 4th and 2, with them obviously being down. Flacco threw just a pure fuck it ball into the end zone, which had no right going to any Cleveland Browns player. But thankfully it bubbled through Marlon Humphrey's arms right into Cedric Tillman's hands for the touchdown. So nice to get one of those bullshit things to happen for the Browns. But as I said, that was pretty much the only good thing from this Browns offense, or to happen really in any part of this game. The Ravens were then able to go and score again. Lamar picked up that ridiculous 3rd and long play, which Miles then limped off the field. At that point, you're thinking, oh, fuck. But thankfully, he went back out there. It doesn't seem like he's hurt from that. But then Lamar Jackson throws another touchdown pass to Walker for his 2nd touchdown of the game. A guy that now has 3 career receptions and 3 career touchdowns. So very impressive for him. Miles Harden got cooked on that one. Pretty much all of the Ravens' passing touchdowns came against the Browns slot corner, whether it was Miles Harden or Cam Mitchell. We spoke quite a few weeks throughout the offseason about how the slot corner role for the Browns was the biggest concern. I think a lot of us expected them to sign someone, maybe address it. They didn't. They decided to roll with these young guys. Miles Harden, to his credit, played well in some sense last week. But pretty bad game from him this week, and an even worse game from Cam Mitchell. And then just to add salt onto the wound, Flacco was then sacked. He fumbles the ball. Roquan Smith returns it for the touchdown, and then another deep touchdown pass from Lamar to Dustin Hopkins. Cam Mitchell, as once again beaten in this game for what was the 2nd or 3rd time. Just really, really bad stuff. At this point, it's just, at that point, it's just gotten embarrassing. The Browns then obviously bring Dylan Gabriel in to finish this game. No point having Flacco out there when the score's 41-10. Quinshon gave some fight, unlike any other offensive player. He got the longest Browns, I think, longest play of the game, not just longest running play of the game, with a 31-yard run from him, and then which then resulted in Dylan Gabriel's first NFL throw, which went for a 1st down, and then his first NFL touchdown to Dylan Sampson in the left corner of the end zone, which was actually a really nice throw, to be honest. Lofted it over TJ Tampa. Yes, the Ravens had some backups in at this point, but TJ Tampa is one of their corners. He's not technically a backup. Really nice throw over the top of him. So one of the only encouraging things from this game. But overall, this was just embarrassing from the offense, as we've seen, as I said earlier, for over a year now. Just atrocious offensive play. The run game was actually slightly better. They got over 100 yards rushing in this game on just 22 carries. Quinshon had 61 yards on 10 carries, obviously over half of that coming on that 1 carry towards the end. But he did look somewhat positive in the limited carries that he got. Did show some good bursts, did show his ability to pick up extra yardage when, some other guys probably won't. So that was positive to see from him. So, as I said, the Browns run game was slightly better, probably better than last week, but what hurt them the most was just the quarterback play. the offensive line play again. I mean, the offensive line pass blocking was pretty bad in this game, but then even still, Joe Flacco was bad in this game. There's no sugarcoating it. And even with some of those sacks that, yes, obviously you want the offensive line to do better, a younger, more athletic quarterback, shall we say, is probably able to get out of those. Whereas Joe Flacco, quite a lot of times in this game, looked like a 40-year-old. Couldn't really move out of the pocket. Multiple sacks where he just, as I said, a younger guy probably gets out of there, but Joe Flacco just was unable to move and just basically had to eat it and go down. So he was pretty bad in this game. As I said, no sugarcoating it. Last week he was, a lot better. The stats obviously weren't great with the 2 interceptions, but you could argue you can definitely say that they weren't on him, and he was, in certain spots looked quite decent last week, shall we say, whereas this week it was just a complete opposite. Flacco was really bad in this game. 2 turnovers from him that led to touchdowns. Not good enough. That is the thing that we obviously spoke about with Flacco. It's the worry with Flacco of obviously the turnovers, how much he turned the ball over even when we were winning games with him in 2023. And, even though those 2 last week weren't on him, that's still 2 turnovers, another 2 turnovers this week. So that's 4 turnovers in 2 games, directly responsible from Joe Flacco. The Browns, as we keep mentioning it, as we've always, as we've brought up so many times, lose the turnover battle, they lose the game. This was just another example of that. Unable to force turnovers, they turn the ball over, both on offense and special teams with, the interception, the fumble recovery, and the block punt. That's just, you're not going to win games even with the Browns defense being as good as they are. As I mentioned earlier, that's 21 points that the defense didn't give up. So, as we did so many times last year, we sat here after a Browns game saying, well, the defense played well, played as well as they could, but everywhere else on the Browns, was terrible. And the Browns defense did play great in this game, but the secondary outside of Denzel Ward was pretty laughably bad. Denzel Ward went out in this game from the only thing I've seen is cramp, which if is the case is pretty soft. If I'm being honest, I usually defend the Denzel Ward, but that must have been a pretty severe case of cramp to not be able to go out there for pretty much a large portion of this game. And when he wasn't out there, this secondary just didn't look very good. If the Browns' defensive line was unable to get pressure quick, it was pretty easy for Lamar to just dice up these guys. As I said earlier, the slot corner position in this game was awful. Cam Mitchell, Miles Harden, multiple times getting beaten, 4 touchdowns. So, the overall Browns defense was great in this game, as they have been in quite a lot of games in the last year where the Browns have been blown out and you look at the score and think they weren't very good. But as I said, to technically only give up 13 points, they were good outside of the secondary. The secondary was quite bad in this game and is a concern moving forward, especially if this whatever injury Denzel Ward had is something that's going to linger and continue and maybe cost result in him missing any more games. That would be a very big concern. And it just shows you how good Denzel Ward is when he's not out there and how bad those guys are. Greg Newsome, after having a really good game last week, wasn't great in this game either. So definitely, not great out of that secondary. But that's no way near as bad as the offense and the special teams. I mean, I was surprised that Bubba Ventrone kept his job. I spoke last off-season, this off-season, about at the very, very start about how I probably expected him to be fired. He was able to keep his job. The Browns special teams just seems to get worse and worse every year. And obviously this year with already missed field goal costing us a game last week, and then a blocked punt obviously costing us points in the game this week. Just an absolute mess from the special teams, from the offense. As I said, just so many times we've been saying this over the last year. There's just so much the Browns need to figure out on this offense, within the offensive line, within that wide receiver room, and of course, most importantly, at quarterback. Another game where the Browns actually had more yards than the other team and lost. Browns had over 300 yards, gave up 242. Same amount of drives, pretty much same yards per play, pretty much same passing yards. But as I mentioned, the Browns held one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL to 45 fucking rushing yards and still gave up 41 points. That's just the Cleveland Browns. That just shows you how bad they are in the other areas, how bad they are on offense to give up, 14 points on offense, to give up that, obviously, the points on special teams as well. Just pretty laughable, if we're being honest, and just sad to even think about that. Before this game, if I had said that the Browns were going to have more yards than the Ravens, they were going to have more time of possession than the Ravens, and they were only going to hold the Ravens to 45 rushing yards, you'd have probably said the Browns at least had a chance to win this game, or did win this game. Not that they got blown out 41-17. So just really, really disappointing across the board. The Browns are now 0-2. They're 0-2 in the division. They're 0-2 in the AFC. So, what was already a very slim chance of making the playoffs before the season started is now just even more slim, if that's the word, slim or slimmer. Because, when it comes down to these kind of the wild card kind of seedings and all of that stuff, and these tiebreakers and stuff, to be 0-2 already and 0-2 in the division, 0-2 in the AFC, not a great start. And as I mentioned at the start, down bad, pretty bad. Would have been great to go in here and beat the Ravens on, celebrating their 30th anniversary from when they stole the team. And instead, they kind of showed us, it basically was just an example of what it's been since they stole our team, which is them having loads of success and us not having any success. And that just accumulated and was represented in them absolutely blowing us out in this game, 41-17. The Ravens are a very, very good team. We've spoken about it, how they're essentially a super team. They are a Super Bowl contender. They are an AFC contender. The Browns are not. None of us expected the Browns to make the playoffs this year, but it is just disappointing to lose a game where, last week they should have won the game. This week, I'm not, of course, saying that they should have won the game, but if you take away those two turnovers and that block punt, you hold the Ravens offense to only 45 rushing yards, and we could be having a completely different conversation right now than we are. But obviously, that's football. That did happen. The Browns did turn the ball over multiple times. They did have the interception. They did have the fumble recovery for a touchdown, and they did have the block punt. So they just have to live with those things, and that's just how they lost this game. So, as I said, really, really disappointed way to lose. We all hate losing to the Ravens any day of the week, let alone when it's them celebrating their 30th anniversary against us. But it as bad as it is, 0-2, all of that stuff. The season's not over yet. It's not time to start throwing it in. I know a lot of people will probably argue with me against that, but even the Ravens themselves started 0-2 last season. I'm not saying that the Browns are the Ravens that are going to go to the AFC Championship game. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But it is still only 2 games, 2 terrible games, 2 terrible losses, but still 2 games. We carry on. And I always like. I never like just being negative in these videos. I like to have at least something positive to talk about. So I will finish it off just by highlighting, good to see Twinshom in there. 10 carries for 60 yards after 1 practice in the last 3 months. When we drafted him, I spoke about it then. I expect him to be great. I expect him to be the Browns' number 1 back for the foreseeable future. This was only a stride in the right direction for him. Harold Fannin, again, making plays in this game, in the passing game. He's someone that's, of course, very exciting. Even how many games the Browns lose this year, it's going to be exciting to watch his development. Dylan Gabriel came in, looked good in the limited role that he got, threw a nice touchdown. That's, of course, good to see. People can say that, that's going up against their backups, end of the game, garbage time, whatever. But you feel a lot better about that than you would have if Dylan Gabriel went in there and threw an interception and didn't complete a pass. So is a positive to see. Would I like to see Dylan Gabriel next week? Yes, to be honest, I probably would. As someone that didn't want Flacco to be the starter for most of the process anyway, and just kind of had to accept it at the end. I would be perfectly happy with the Browns after 2 games moving on from Joe Flacco. But Kevin Stefanski has come out and already said that they're not going to make a change, so it will be Flacco again next week. Whether he plays the whole game or not, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, going up against, we start our NFC little stint here with the multiple games against the NFC North and obviously Packers, then obviously Vikings in London. But Packers pretty good defense. That's going to be a very, very tough game. So it's only going to get harder for this offense. It's only going to get harder for this team. How much does Flacco remain in it for that? We'll have to wait and see. And as I said, I'm not too mad if Flacco does get pulled out for one of the rookies, because in the end of the day, the more the losses pile up, the more the season becomes more about the development of those guys and seeing what you have in those guys. And obviously, you can only see what you have with them if they play. Dylan Gabriel got a couple snaps today. Did essentially the best that he could in those snaps that he got. That's obviously a positive thing. So hopefully do get to see some of these, more from him and more from the rookies going forward. But finally, positives. Jacksonville lost, so that is a good start. I mean, they lost the game where Joe Burrow went out with an injury pretty early in this game. Browning threw 3 interceptions, and the Jaguars had the lead for pretty much the whole game, and still somehow lost the game. There seemed to be a little bit of dysfunction. Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence arguing on the sidelines. So, us owning their pick, we're all for that. Let's have more of that. Let's have the dysfunction continue in Jacksonville. Every game that they lost is a win for the Browns. So good that they lost. And then the Steelers as well, losing in pretty funny fashion. Caleb Johnson, I said last week, if I'm going to be wrong on anyone, then hopefully it is Caleb Johnson, someone that I really wanted at the Browns, someone that I was really annoyed when he got drafted by the Steelers. Last week, I think he had like 2 carries for -2 yards or something. This week, 1 carry for 1 yard, but had a really bad play on special teams where he let the ball slip through his hands, bounce into the end zone, and the Seattle player was able to get on it and scored a touchdown. So Steelers lost a game where Aaron Rodgers threw 2 interceptions, looked pretty terrible. Am I just being a massive hater right now, and is this just pure copium? Absolutely. The Browns suck. I'm going to be on my hate watch regardless. Doesn't matter whether the Browns are good or bad. I'm going to be on my hate watch regardless. So always cheering on Jacksonville to lose, always cheering on the Steelers to lose. So obviously, let's keep those losses coming this season. But overall, pretty bad one in this game. Not really much positives to take from it. Browns got their arse handed to them. Joe Flacco was really bad in his return to Baltimore. Is it time to go to the rookies? I think so, but they're going to hang on even for another week, and we'll have to see when that does become the case. But that will do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really, really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a great week as much as you can on a loser Monday with the Browns losing, in as embarrassing fashion as they did. But stay positive, and as always, go Browns.